Alright, I hope you can hear me okay, but here's my location right now. I had to get out of the house and I knew this waterfall would be beautiful right next to the road. So convenient for me at the moment, and it's kind of late in the day, and I wasn't expecting many people up here anyway, and there's no one here. So I'm gonna have this to myself. I thought I'd make a little video of my process for this kind of thing. So what I have on my camera, which is just a Nikon D810, and there's nothing necessarily special about this DSLR. It's the professional grade DSLR. And on the camera right now, I'm starting with wide angle. So I'm gonna try and get the whole scene to start with. And then I have other lenses to bring in closer, like a 50 and other, my 135. Because I'm not a big fan of the wide angle, to be honest. But I want to get the whole scene to start. So the decisions I'm making as far as settings go, let's see if you can get this in view. Okay, so I have ISO 100, you know, just a good baseline for outdoor photography. There's no reason to necessarily use that over something like 200 or even going lower to 64 or whatever, unless you're trying to control your shutter speed, which I might want to do. So I can always lower that ISO because this camera has, now I have to film and switch, ISO can go down to 64 and then also has low. So I can control my shutter speed with that. So I'm just going to start at 100, so I can always change that up if I want to. And f-stop, I'm going with 16, so I'm just positive that everything is going to be nice and sharp and in focus for me. And also that gives me, again, a longer shutter speed. So if I wanted to, I could start at f11 or something like that, still get most, you know, the scene is going to be sharp. And then I would have more leeway as far as shutter speed goes. But I don't have to make that. I know I'm going to want a long shutter speed for the effect I want to do for the waterfall. I want to have that glassy effect, that look. And then when it comes to shutter speed, now I'm just dependent on exposure. Now I'm always underexposed. I have my exposure compensation for my light meter underexposed all the time. I have always done that. That's how I learned when shooting slide film that you are always better off slightly under. Now I shoot Nikon and that seems to be the case. Other cameras, you can completely ignore that, but play around with it and see if it's consistent with how your editing style goes. I really like to bring down those highlights, have a kind of a moodier image, kind of. Not really, I wouldn't call my style dark and moody by any means, but I do hate having specular highlights, so I like to make sure I have all the data in the highlights possible. And Nikon is very good at withholding the data that's found in the shadows, so that's why I underexpose. And I could go on for days about this stuff, and sorry, but people who find this interesting will find this interesting. So it says I'm underexposed for my framing that I have, and I just put it on live view just for sake of ease. And you can see the scene I have here. I haven't really finalized that framing yet. I kind of just set it up because I knew this was going to be the shot I want to meter for. And when looking at the scene, I see that it is, in general, a dark scene. So when we average every pixel in this scene, it's going to be darker than middle gray. And I'm getting really into the technical stuff of this, but you know, knowing this stuff is what can improve your photography and understand your camera. So that means the meter on my camera is going to overexpose this by default, okay? And if you guys want more of explanation than that, I can go into it, but I'm just gonna leave it at that. So I know, let's get this to focus again. I know I'm gonna want this to be underexposed. So it's underexposed about 3/4 to a stop there. And my meter is already adjusted to be underexposed, about half a stop. So I'm underexposed according to the meter about 1.5 stops, okay? And that's, for what I'm seeing here, about where I want to start at. And then I can always make adjustments. So here we have my live view. I'm just gonna tinker with this to get the framing how I want it. I wanna make sure that the sky is cropped out. That's not adding to the scene. So I want it to be about the waterfall and these fall colors. Then I have my toggle switch here, controls where my focus point is. And I want to focus in the first third of the frame for f16. And that will ensure that I want to make sure I find a good contrast element. Now, one of the weaknesses of some of the Nikon cameras is the focusing. So I focus in the first third of the scene. So if we're looking at the scene from the side at an angle, how far into the depth of the scene, and that will ensure that everything before and after it is in focus at f16. And that's a scientific thing about how cameras and lenses work. So I'm going to go ahead with my first test shot. Now I'm on a very sturdy tripod, heavy, and so I don't have to worry about camera shake with this. So I'm just going to click the shutter. When I'm using my lightweight travel tripod, I know I have a remote for the camera somewhere, but who can keep track of those things? They're like the size of a quarter. So what I use is on my camera, one of the settings here, see if it can focus on it. On the dial is the little clock, so that's the timer. So I just use the timer. So I click the shutter, any shake I've done to the camera has time to wear off before the shutter clicks. And that takes care of a lot of the camera shake. All right, so the photo's done. We had it at 5 seconds. So I'm gonna hit play, and here's the image. And I'm quite happy with that. And you can tell from the LCD screen, that looks pretty much perfectly exposed. I can go ahead into my histogram, and you might say, oh, that's underexposed, but remember we talked about the scene in general is a dark scene on average, okay? So let me hit this again. The only thing, so what I'm seeing here is all the highlight data is here. When this tapers off to the very edge, especially this white one, all the highlights are there except for a very little bit, and that's gonna be in the water itself. So I can even underexpose this more, though I'm at risk for losing the shadow data. So I think this is spot on. If I want to, I can even increase the intensity of this glassy look. So I'm just going to zoom in on the water. You're catching the motion of the water, and it's got this really cool kind of glassy, icy look to it. And there's some motion happening down here, kind of swirls and things. Very cool effect. And I can even make that more intense by doing what I said before of lowering the ISO. So I switch that down to 64, and so that means I can adjust my shutter speed to, because the 64 was 2 clicks. Okay, so that's just the basic math. But it is getting darker here. So I'm just gonna look at my, let me get this so you guys can see. Yeah, so you can see it's way under now because it's actually gotten darker here. It's getting close to sunset, but it's completely overcast, so it's not gonna really affect any colors. So I want it to be about a stop under. That was like perfect on my metering for that last shot. So let's do this. This is at 13 seconds. So let's see what happens with that. And so, like, okay, the whole explanation of just taking this one photo has taken me about 10 minutes, but I had this already set up to go in about, 30 seconds to a minute. And I was like, you know what, it's quiet out here. No one's out here. I might as well do an explanation of my process because it might help people. And I want people to be able to take better photos. Take your time with your photos. And, you know, I know that even if it gets dark out here, I am still going to get some cool photos. The only thing that gets troublesome when it's really dark is actually focusing. So that's the only time I actually struggle, but a flashlight can help with that. So we're done with this shot, and we can see, look at these colors, how, this is just the camera on the phone showing it's overexposed. I can go to the histogram and you can see that it's not overexposed. But you can just see how the colors just pop in this evening or overcast light. It's just so beautiful for fall colors. And so if you get an opportunity to go photograph waterfalls and the understory and the forest when it's overcast, you may be thinking, oh, it's no point, I can't get those awesome views. You know, this is the stuff that makes you a better photographer, makes you see things differently, and you kind of get this place to yourself because it's kind of wet out, kind of rainy. People aren't going to be out here, so you kind of can just take your time with things and not feel like you're in anyone's way. So let's compare the glassiness of the water. And this actually doesn't look very sharp to me. I may have hit the, I think I may have hit the leg of the tripod when I was taking this shot because it looks blurry. So I'm gonna redo this shot, but let's look at the glassy water and compare it to the previous one. There we go. So it's very interesting what it does, right? The color palette has changed just from those settings. But again, this second one is out of focus, so that might have something to do with it. All right, I hope this video is helpful, and I'm going to have, at the end, when I'm done rambling on, the final picture that I walk through with you on this. And if you like this video, please let me know, leave a comment, ask your questions, and I can definitely do more like this. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy sharing my knowledge because I learned at a time when it was film/digital. So I kind of have an education in both worlds, which is kind of cool. So I'm happy to share those techniques. And thanks again for watching and making it to the end.